is the New South Wales Country Hour with Michael Condon on ABC Radio New South Wales.
And a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the program on this Thursday lunchtime. Coming up, we'll be looking at the issue of shipping and cotton. There's some good news and some bad news there. And we'll also be looking at the new agenda for the National Party. Lobby groups are saying that there's a long list of issues that need to be addressed.
We're just looking forward to New South Wales Government actually getting back to governing now, rather than spending time on these types of leadership issues.
And we'd like to hear from you. You can send us a text. And what would you like to see in this new look National Party? Certainly a new leadership group at the National Party. You can send us a text. 0467 922 684. That's the number to text me here at the Country Hour. We're joined now by the new Deputy Premier. Of course, we've got a new Premier. We've also got a new Deputy. Paul Toole took over from John Barilaro. He's seen as a steady pair of hands and a pretty good negotiator. And he joins me now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michael.
So, in terms of the change of direction, are you going to sort of preside over any particular change of direction for the party now, do you think?
Well, I think really what the people of New South Wales want at the moment is stability, and they want unity. And I think this is a critical pathway that we're at the moment. We've actually seen incredible work being done by Gladys Berejiklian. We've seen incredible work by John Barilaro. And what we need to make sure is business as usual. We need to make sure that the work that they have done in keeping the state safe, in making sure that they've actually set the roadmap out to recovery, is being delivered. And I think that's what communities want to see right now from leaders in this state as well.
We've heard from a professor in politics at University of Sydney who was saying that now's the time that the National Party should maybe do a bit of soul searching, be looking at some retail politics, which the National Party used to be so good at. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, I think the National Party is a very proud party. I'm very fortunate to lead very talented men and women that are actually true champions. They fight for the bush and they fight for things that matter in their local communities. And that's what I want our members to do, to get out there and listen to the communities and then work hard to actually achieve those differences that matter to the lives of those in those local areas. Now, we want to make sure that we are still getting a fair share of investment. We want to make sure that investment is occurring in the regions, but we want to also make sure it's going in the right direction. It's going to actually getting back to that grassroots level where it's going to impact on the lives of people each and every day. And that's what it's about. We've got to grow jobs in the regions. We've got to provide opportunities for young people. And I believe the National Party is best positioned to do that.
But is that then focusing on the family farm and agriculture, or still with the focus, as we've seen from John Barilaro and also from Barnaby Joyce, for the mining sector as well and jobs there?
Well, I'm going to say that, I'm actually the son of a farmer, so I, have very strong ties to the land. I've got very strong ties to those in the agricultural sector, and I think this is important that we make sure that our farming communities are looked after and making sure that we are working very closely with them. And
so it sounds like it is a bit of a shift that you're keen to see there.
I want to see a balance, Michael. I think that's the most important thing. It's about a balance here as well. Next week, one of the very first meetings that I've got already booked in my diary is to sit down with New South Wales farmers and to be able to talk to them about the things that matter to them right now. Now, I've had a pretty good relationship with them, being the Regional Transport and Roads Minister previously. But what I also want to do is to find out what some of those bigger issues are that are important to them across the state. And together, I want to make sure that we can work on delivering them as we need to.
Because, of course, there's a number of independents in the Parliament. There's also 3 members of Shooters, Farmers, Fishers in the lower house. You maybe want to try and win some of those seats back into the future and maybe change the message a bit to do that, perhaps?
Absolutely. I think you can never rest upon your laurels. I think you've always got to be working for our communities. And, we want to retain seats. We want to gain seats. And, that's what I'll be working hard for as the leader of the New South Wales Nationals to be able to do. Now, we've had a tough number of years. I think if you look at it, I don't think anyone could have predicted that the last 5 years we've had everything thrown at us. Like we've had droughts, we've had bushfires, we've had floods, and we've had a global pandemic. But, as a government, I think we've been pretty responsible in making sure that, we've been able to find the funds to be able to support the rural sector through all of these difficult times. And, at the moment, there's hope around on the horizon. We've got bumper harvest crops that are about to occur. We've got stock prices at an all-time high. So I think it is an exciting time, but we've got to grab it, capitalise on it, and invest in the right areas.
Now, you were mentioning there about maybe looking after the farm sector a bit more. That's what the Nationals are famous for, their retail policies, the diesel fuel rebates, some tax concession, land tax reform for farmers, maybe moving away from issues like we saw the koala wars, or maybe the issues about brumbies as well. Are you going to be pursuing the same policies with the same vigour that John Barilaro did there?
Well, if you're asking me if I'm going to be a fighter for things in the bush, the answer is yes. I don't think anyone, and if you ask the Libs, they'll probably tell you that I'm a real pain in the backside, because if it's something that matters to me and it matters to our communities in regional and rural New South Wales, I'll stand up and I'll fight for them. But I think...
But some of those issues were seen on the periphery, though, weren't they? I mean, that's sort of the argument that's been put forward by a number of people to me, that they were on the periphery of what the National Party should be fighting for.
Yeah, look, and sometimes, though, there are lots of different views about what is important and that as well. And, what I want to make sure is, I've got a very different style. I want to make sure that, some of those robust discussions and conversations, and they will be held. They don't need to be played out publicly. I'll have them behind closed doors to actually try and get an outcome that is going to benefit our communities. And that's what I'll be working hard to be able to do, Michael.
Now, the council amalgamation issue, you led from the front on that issue. Gladys Berejiklian famously, when she was leaving, said if she had her time over again, she'd do the amalgamations issues differently, and there are still some regions fighting it. Are you going to relook at that?
Look, it was a tough time, and I had the time there where I was actually the local government minister, and there's no doubt when you're doing major reform, sometimes it's just not going to be popular. But at the time, it was being done for the right reasons, and I think it's one of those decisions that have been made that we want to work with those communities in taking them forward. And I understand that some communities are still wanting different things to happen and to change, but at the moment, I think we've got to make sure we work closely with them to be able to go forward and to.
So the door's open. You're willing to talk to them again and maybe look at some other options rather than just a blanket no amalgamation. That's it.
I think if we can help them as a council, that's what I want to do. And I think that investment that we're seeing in our communities is going to continue to happen. And irrespective, I think we're doing that with a lot of councils, and that's through programs that we're running right out there now. I've got Fixing Local Roads, where councils are getting investment into priority roads. These are roads that, people want to be able to travel on each and every day. They're priority roads, and they can get from, home to work, to school, and back home again safely. These are important. Fixing country bridges. This is actually fixing up those bridges that have got weight limits. Sometimes you hear stories where fire trucks can't use them because there's a load limit on it. Sometimes it might actually mean there's another 20 or 30 kilometres to somebody's trip because they can't actually use that particular bridge. Sometimes, the big projects get all the big headlines, but I'll tell you what, hundreds of little projects are the ones that actually make the biggest difference to the lives of people living in regional rural communities. And I want to make sure that we touch people's lives. And these are the kinds of projects that actually get back to the grassroots level, but they get back to the lives of get back to the point of making a difference to the lives of people in our communities.
Now, you said you're going on a bit of a tour with the Premier, Dominic Perrottet. We've got a text here from Mark at Wauchope who's saying it's not just about mining and farming. He says the towns and villages are also crucial. He'd like a few more rebates for health and education and utilities, and maybe some important jobs in some of those regional towns as well. What's your response to that?
Yeah, look, I think that's it's a good point. So, it is correct. We want to grow our regions, we want to grow jobs, and we want to provide opportunities. I've got, young children. And I think I said it yesterday when I got into the role. Every day I get up out of bed and I work hard, because I want to make sure that there's a future for my 3 kids. I want to make sure there's a future for young people in our regional communities. And I want to be able to keep young people in our towns without having to pack up and move away. We've got to provide those opportunities and actually set the environment where we can see private investment occurring in our regions that is also going to be able to create jobs. And, I think at the moment we're at a point whereby, as soon as we hit 80% double vaccinations here in this state, we're going to see people flocking back out of Greater Sydney. They're going to go into the regions because they understand what is there to offer at the moment. And I'll tell you what, we're going to see a real boost there, because I know people in Sydney, they're sick of being in those apartment blocks, the concrete jungle that I say that they live in. They can't wait to get out to the regions and explore even further. We saw it happening a number of months ago. Unfortunately, they haven't been out because they've been in a lockdown period, but we know they will get back out there and explore regional New South Wales, and tourism is also going to be important as part of this.
Deputy Premier, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
It's 16 minutes past 12.
You're listening to The Country Hour
on ABC Radio New South Wales.
Well, one of the New South Wales' largest lobby groups is looking forward to the government getting back to governing now the new leadership team is elected. New South Wales Country Women's Association has invited the new Premier and Deputy to join them for a meeting to discuss many aspects of rural life that the organisation believes needs improving. The CWA's CEO, Danica Lees, told Amelia Bernasconi there's a lot to catch the new team up on.
It's always a job we take really seriously in terms of putting forward what our members want us to, on behalf of them, to be a voice for them on a range of different issues. And there are certainly a lot of different issues that need attention, and particularly regionally based issues. So I suppose from our perspective, we're just looking forward to New South Wales Government actually getting back to governing now, rather than spending time on these types of leadership issues. And hopefully we can get meetings with these relevant leaders and put forward a range of different topics such as rural health issues, access to education, level crossing safety, inland rail matters. I mean, the list just goes on. And, of course, not to mention the fact, specific issues facing regional areas as we come out of COVID lockdowns as well.
You've touched on quite a few issues. It sounds like there is a bit of a job ahead of you and the team, Danica. But if we can look at maybe rural health for the moment, I know that the parliamentary sittings are back on this week, and obviously amid COVID, I think there has been an increased spotlight put on our regional hospitals in particular. I guess what are the big things in that space that you think the government really needs to act on quickly? Yeah,
you're right. There were the inquiries back on this week in relation to the rural health inquiry. So the committee holding that inquiry was holding a number of hearings. So whilst the Liberal Party and the National Party were spending time electing new leaders, a lot of people from right across New South Wales were actually appearing at rural health inquiry hearings to put forward a range of concerns, on top of many others that have already put forward their range of concerns on rural health delivery. It's something we wanted to make sure that we provided a really robust submission to, which we did. We surveyed our members and also non-members that lived in regional areas about their experiences with rural health, and had over 800 responses to that survey, and which confirms pretty much what we already knew as an organisation, that there are some serious flaws in how rural health is delivered right across New South Wales. We have deep respect for the rural health workers in these areas. They're really dedicated and passionate people, but they are working in a system that, but in our opinion, is actually broken. It's not something that can be tinkered with around the edges. We really want the government to take this inquiry seriously, and actually look at what they need to do from a really substantive reform point of view to improve how rural health is delivered going forward.
Danica Lees from the CWA in New South Wales. It's coming up to 20 minutes past 12. Quite a few texts coming through. Someone saying, what about country health and hospitals? That was obviously one of the issues that Danica Lees talked about there in regards to what the CWA would like to see. It's coming up to 20 minutes past 12 on the Country Hour. The New South Wales Farmers Association is calling for the state government to introduce on-farm quarantine to enable more foreign workers to help with the harvest. The system's being trialled in Queensland. New South Wales Agriculture Minister Adam Marshall told David Claughton he's working with the Commonwealth and other states to try and make it work.
We've got agricultural sectors for the second year in a row that doesn't have access to a backpacker workforce. And so while the Commonwealth Government have had the Pacific Labour Scheme and the Seasonal Worker Scheme, the vast majority of the agricultural sector have never accessed workers through those schemes because they've always relied on the backpacker workforce, usually 130, 140,000 on the eastern seaboard at any one time, and they're not here. There's none of them. And so even though those two schemes are available, and there's been 2,500 workers come in the last 12 months in both of those schemes into New South Wales, a lot of people in the agricultural sector still have difficulty finding overseas workers because it's not just quarantining, but you've got to source them from those Pacific Island nations, but then you've got to find a way to get them to Australia. And unfortunately, a lot of the commercial carriers understandably have very limited flight options.
Well, there's only 2,000 of those workers that have come in, and you've announced that there's a few hundred more coming in at the moment, but that's well short of the thousands and thousands required. What about the home quarantine issue? Could that be a solution?
Well, it could very well be, and this is something I'm trying to explore now together with the Queensland, Victorian and Tasmanian governments. Obviously, at the moment, and the New South Wales Farmers Association understand this because I've been in constant communication with them. At the moment, through the National Cabinet guidelines on quarantining of all overseas arrivals, on-farm quarantine would be 4 times more expensive than hotel quarantine because of the current requirements for quarantining facilities. And Queensland have found that with on-farm quarantine, it's been incredibly costly and not used by industry because it's actually cheaper even in Queensland to bring them through the Brisbane hotel quarantine system.
Where's the cost of having them on-farm?
The fact that you have to have purpose-built facilities, and then you have to cover the cost of those state government authorities to do regular visits and inspections while you've got people quarantined in those facilities. And that's why the government here made the decision that instead of going down the more expensive path, we'd try and make it cheaper for industry, and we're the only state that actually subsidises half of the quarantining costs. And that's why we've facilitated the arrival of more overseas ag workers in New South Wales than all the other states.
So no major changes coming. We're just going to have to keep, the sector will have to keep dealing with the limited number coming through.
Well, I mean, I'm very keen to explore opportunities to change that, particularly when we get to those 70% and 80% double vaccination rates. But we have to be following the National Cabinet decision and guidelines around quarantining.
New South Wales Agriculture Minister Adam Marshall, cherry grower Guy Gaeta is hoping to find some solution soon. He needs to pick his crop in 6 or 7 weeks, and he hasn't got any workers lined up at all. He told David Claughton that on-farm quarantine would be a good solution for him.
It makes sense. Like, you could do the quarantine on farm, the 14 days, the people that could be working, picking whatever horticulture products.
So they could be working while quarantining, you say?
Yes, and the farmer could be getting his produce picked so it can get to the consumer. And to say that it costs more, how's it going to cost more?
Well, we did ask this question of the Minister. He confirmed that the government is looking at the issue, but he said that the experience in Queensland is that you have to have purpose-built accommodation and you've got to pay for the authorities to come out and do whatever it is that they need to do.
Look, I just find it just a drum up. We got huge problem in this country with workers. We'll be starting picking cherries in about 6-7 weeks, and we've got nobody at the moment. Nobody on the books. Nobody on the books.
How many do you need?
And we need about 50.
And at this time, 6 or 7 weeks out from the pick, would you normally have a crew together?
When the backpackers were here, 417 visas, we would have hundreds on the book.
And you would have had the same problem last season, yeah? Because this is now going into the second year.
Yes, we just managed to get through it last year. We went through 95 people and to have 50. Like, people were just coming. the government was hell bent on Australians can work. Fair enough. Some did, some didn't. But we went through 95 people through the books in 5 weeks.
You're getting some people in, I imagine, that you're having to pay the hotel quarantine cost, like half the cost. Government's paying half, farmers are paying half. Have you had that experience?
No, because we haven't relied on the Pacific Islanders at the moment, because the only people which are coming in, workers which have been coming in, are Pacific Islanders, and we get excluded from the Pacific Islanders because we've got to guarantee them work for 6 months. And when we've got a cherry season the last 5 weeks, how can we do that?
No. And the government's saying they've had 2,000 come in so far of those Pacific Islanders. They've got another 500 coming at the moment. But obviously that's not helping horticulture at all. Is that your understanding, that they can't really go and work anywhere in hort?
No, what they should be doing is an agency should be looking after these people, Pacific Islanders, or when they come in with the egg visa, and they can distribute them around and they can move them around and they can give them the 6 more months work or more. We have tried to resolve and tried to tell the government that we need like the 417 visa reactivated and try to bring some people from overseas. Look, David, we can't even... I've got 6 pickers which come every year from Queensland. Unless the borders are open, they won't come down because they won't be able to get back in.
That's Cherry Guy Gaeta. You're listening to The Country Hour, 26 minutes past 12.
You're listening to The Country Hour
on ABC Radio New South Wales.
Well, from Monday, Coles have confirmed they're moving to a retail-ready model for their meat that's pre-prepared, pre-cut meat in plastic, ready-to-go containers. So is this the end for the butcher behind the counter at the supermarkets? Well, that's the question that Patrick Bell put to Justin Smith at the Meat Workers Union.
I mean, this has been something that Coles have been working on for quite some time. They've been trying to slowly get customers used to pre-packaged meat. But over the time, they've been reducing the cuts on show. But our members have still been there serving customers and still can answer questions to people.
Right then. So is Coles alone in this, or are we going to see this perhaps in some of the other chains as Woolworths maybe scaled down?
Yeah, Coles have been trying to do this for quite some time. Woolworths, I believe, have had a couple of goes. And I've got to say that history will tell you that in the past we've had Coles stores rebuilt to be ready retail, and halfway through their refit, they discovered that they needed to keep the butchers in store because that's what the customer wanted, and they've had to change their plans and redo that. This is probably about the third attempt at bringing in retail ready, and this is probably the last attempt. They've definitely gone all the way this time. They've really upset the workforce. I've got to say that they originally put this out there saying that this is a customer requirement. This is what the customers wanted. They don't want to see butchers anymore, which is total fabrication. This is really an attack on people's wages. The butchers in store and meat packers in store are paid more than the rest of the people in the store. That's because they had a separate agreement for many, many years and negotiated that in good faith. This has been an attack just to reduce how much it costs for them to put that meat on the shelf. So full-time staff have been made permanent part-time. And not only have they lost the hours, but they've also lost $3 an hour in their wages because of the difference in the wages across the store.
Do you think many of those folks are going to take up the option of being redeployed, or are they just going to look elsewhere?
Look, we've had a number of conversations with Coles. At the last meeting, it was about, I think it was 50% had put in for redundancy, 30 had asked for redeployment, and 20% had not made their mind up yet. I suspect, and what we've seen is a number of people who asked for redeployment, of the 30%, they had then changed their mind and asked for redundancy because they simply weren't offered their full-time hours. They were offered, in some cases, 12 hours a week, from 38 hours a week down to 12 hours a week.
But the Australian Meat Industry Association says the Coles decision could be good news for independent butchers. CEO Patrick Hutchinson told David Claughton that there's growing interest in specialty meat and more consumers are now seeking out their local butcher. The association is also working to redeploy some of those Coles staff to work in independent butcher shops.
We've had a couple of discussions with them about redeploying or assisting with the redeployment of those people into the independent butcher chain, which are our members. So
1,500 people, that's quite a big redeployment though, isn't it?
Well, yes, but I mean, it's also got to be ensuring too that those people want to work in those areas, because they can either take a voluntary redundancy or they get moved around in the organisation. So, Coles and Woolies have sort of instigated this distribution centre style model with their meat processing and packing, and are not doing the in-store cutting up of product or packaging of product.
So that means that they're sort of buying the same number of livestock, they're just processing it at a distribution centre and not in-store anymore.
That's correct.
No implications really for the livestock supply chain in particular.
No, I wouldn't see that at all. In fact, I think Coles processes about 600,000 cattle a year, so one would say that was going to remain. I think more importantly, what we know now is that people potentially will also, as they have during COVID, gravitate towards butchers in more detail because of getting advice and getting an understanding of product, which obviously is no longer available in supermarkets.
So good news really for those independent stores, often many of them just outside the supermarket, actually.
Correct. And there's, good reasons for that strategic positioning of our butchers in those in shopping malls like that. And look, we've seen certainly a rise and a fall in purchases with butchers during COVID. It's just the way these things happen. But the more innovation that our guys are doing with home delivery and food service and the like, and as well as that, also giving an education to consumers about product, about how to store it, how to cook it, lining and linking in with MLA and APL and a lot of others to deliver that. We are certainly seeing an uptick in people who are going back to the butcher shop, and so we need.
Can you measure that in numbers in some way? Like this? How significant is that trend then?
Yeah, look, the trend certainly is there for an increase. It does vary. It does go up and down, but I think we hover around that 20% of market share on the domestic sales front. I think Woolies is about 30 and Coles at 28. So we hold that third position fairly.
So it's still okay. Hard. Still a sizable part of the market.
Absolutely, and it's a very different type of activity for the market. We're seeing those bespoke and artisan style of shops occurring in metropolitan areas of Australia. But the butchers out there, they're the ones who they supply the meat tray for the Friday night raffle for the footy club and sponsor footy clubs and sports clubs, and it's a real community group. But the butcher is also the last bastion of the window of for rural Australia to metropolitan Australia, and so that's why we work so hard to ensure that they maintain that, because otherwise obviously no one would know anything about rural Australia and metro Australia if certainly if butchers weren't around.
Patrick Hutchinson from the Australian Meat Industry Council. It's coming up to 28 minutes to 1. We'll have some weather details shortly. Also, cotton markets, some issues shipping it overseas. We'll hear more about that. Also, container movements, some problems with that too. That's coming up shortly too. But before we do anything else, let's get some news headlines now from Adam Story. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Michael. There's been some changes to the roadmap to reopening. Now, from October the 25th, all school students in New South Wales will return to face-to-face learning. There'll be increased caps on wedding and funeral, so 100 people will be allowed to gather for those. Groups of 10 will be able to gather in a home, while 30 will be able to gather in outdoor settings. So this weekend's your last weekend to yourself. So make the most of it. I'm already booked in for the weekend after and the weekend after that. People in regional New South Wales who've only had one COVID vaccination can return from next week, though. The state's new Deputy Premier Paul Toole says regional areas, including those outside of Greater Sydney, the Blue Mountains, Wollongong, Shellharbour and the Central Coast. Meanwhile, the state has recorded 587 new locally acquired cases. There's also been 8 more deaths, and that included 2 people who tested positive after they died at home. In other news today, the Federal Treasurer is hoping Australia and France can move on from the diplomatic falling out over the cancelled submarine deal. It comes as France announced it will return its ambassador to Australia to what they say is redefine relations with Canberra. And the White House has announced plans for the US President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping to meet by video link before the end of the year. I'm just wondering if you're able to dial into that. It'll be live streamed on something like YouTube.
I doubt it.
Bit of fun
maybe
to watch.
if you're the CIA, you probably can.
Yeah, you could probably. Now, the big news, Michael, I know you'll be happy about this. Kylie Minogue has confirmed she's moving back to Australia permanently after 30 years of living in the UK. She said she's been recently been here and it felt good to be home with the family. And we'll
loved
be
it so much,
campaign.
she's coming home. She's going to throw a shrimp on the barbie
Absolutely.
for us.
Yeah, you might be able to get her on the show, mate, finally. You know?
That's right, yes. And it was you were talking about the relaxation of some of those moving around the state. So hopefully we'll be able to get the country hour out and do some more outside broadcasts, which we haven't been able to do for about a year.
And I want to go on a trip this year.
That's what Helen used to say as well. Yeah. Well, all right, we'll have to arrange it. We'll have to do something. We'll have to.
Mate, I'm so valuable downstairs, they couldn't.
I'm sure they
possibly afford to lose me.
I'm sure they could work something out.
Yeah.
All right. We'll talk to the powers
Not too far, though.
No, that's right, mate. Southern Highlands or so. That's what you're thinking.
Like that,
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Adam.
Not too country.
No. Right. Fair enough. All right. Okay. The request has gone in.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Adam's story there with the news headlines. Let's find out what's happening with the weather details. Jordan Natara's at the Bureau. Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, Michael.
So there's obviously in the lead up. There's not much rain, but the rain coming in the weekend, and I guess that's what people are interested in at the moment in terms of the farm sector. How much rain and whereabouts it might fall.
Yeah, so as you've already mentioned, while we actually have got a couple of storms in the areas of the upper west and around White Cliffs, it isn't producing much rainfall. At least, basically, we're seeing maximums of a millimetre just under those storms. However, as we head into the coming days, we are starting to see the moisture being dragged in from the tropics as we head towards Saturday, Sunday and Monday into the new week. That is going to be building basically a quite widespread system of rain across the region. The amount is still uncertain at this stage. However, we are generally confident that we'll be seeing the combination of a trough that will be dragging in moisture with a cold front coming through, particularly on Sunday into Monday. That will be increasing rainfall totals for areas of the state, particularly around our northern inland and northern ranges, so areas around the New England, as well as areas around the Hunter and mid-north coast coastlines. The order of rainfall around 10 millimetres on a daily scale is probably a good starting point. However, we are looking at the potential for storm activity in the area as well as this system pushes across, which looks as though that it has the potential to produce quite high rainfall totals with this high tropical moisture. So at the moment, as I already mentioned, obviously we've got this combination of uncertainty, which is, I guess, muddying the waters is really how we can give confidence with where the rainfall is going to be. But at this moment, the high confidence is that it's going to generally be at least a couple of millimetres widespread across areas of our northern inland and our ranges, all the way across up towards our northeastern border. But at the moment, the models are still bouncing around where those higher totals are going to be.
Right, still bouncing around. So we're still not certain of what areas of the state you're still thinking the north, New England, northwest are going to get the lion's share of this.
Yeah, so areas around Moree heading towards Tenterfield, looking as though that you're getting, again, particularly over the 24-hour, somewhere between 10 and 30 mils over a 24-hour period, particularly over that Monday, is looking like something that is possible. What I guess could be the problem, obviously, is that if this system does, accelerate any further, those rainfall totals may either push further towards the Queensland border, or if it slows down, that also has the potential of pushing further back down towards areas of the Central Tablelands as well, producing higher rainfall totals over areas around Orange, Bathurst and Lithgow as well. So it's a little bit early to say.
Right, so if it slows down, there'll be more sort of around the central west, and then if it speeds up, it'll maybe even less in the north.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think at the moment, what we can be really generally confident is that there is definitely going to be the impact of this frontal system and that trough. The rainfall totals themselves, again, aren't necessarily going to be clear-cut at this stage. Confidence-wise, areas basically to the northeast, again, there's areas particularly around the New England are going to be more likely to see rainfall at least above 10 millimetres over a 24-hour period. But the isolated totals, or even let's say the more likely areas of having higher rainfall totals, are broadly stretched across quite a broad area of the state at this stage. Until we get really closer to the date, it's really going to be hard to say exactly where it's going to fall.
Yeah, because there's quite a few crops that in the central west that wouldn't mind a drink at the moment, so I bet that they've got their fingers crossed and it slows down a bit.
Yeah, so at the moment, I think what we really want to be kind of highlighting is that, it is definitely a little bit too early to give high confidence of the rainfall, but it does look like it has the potential, being basically due to the fact that we are dragging all that moisture from the tropics. So while we're obviously having updates coming out every day, obviously listening to your radio station is going to be the first place that we give you the information.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Jordan.
That's okay. Catch you later, mate.
Jordan Natara at the Bureau there. It's 21 minutes to 1.
The Country Hour on ABC Radio New South Wales.
Well, the number of feral pigs on Woodford Island, the largest inland island in the Southern Hemisphere, has exploded in a matter of years, causing significant damage to both cane land and also cropping. And farmers on other islands in the Clarence River in the state's north, where the pests have been largely eradicated, are concerned that it's just a matter of time before the pigs swim across from the mainland and those populations rebuild. Kim Honan has more.
Cane farmer Alistair McFarlane estimates the population has gone from 0 to more than 120 pigs on the island in the Clarence River.
Oh, well, they're chewing the cane up and make a nest in it. Where there's zero till and a lot of thrash, they root all the roots out. And they seem to be after earthworms or whatever they can find in the root system of the cane. Just to have that many pigs here, it's a nightmare.
He says that it's a full-time job trying to control the pigs.
If you go out in the morning and at night, you've got to do your other work. It's massive. Even to trap them, you've got to set the traps and then you've got to put feed in there. It becomes a chore.
And how many do you think you've destroyed through traps and baiting?
Well, there's been doggers here too, probably some of the doggers, but I don't think we might have got some little tiny ones with a bait, but as far as eradication, we've probably eradicated 20, probably the best we could do. But we're trying to get some traps up and running and trap them, but there's that much food, and with a cane in there, they're nearly in the Garden of Eden, really.
Further downstream on Warragah Island, there's only one boar causing Milton Lewis grief, but he's concerned numbers could rebuild to what he saw a few years ago.
At one stage there were 3 sows with litters. Nothing like the numbers that are obviously in other areas, but they did do quite a bit of damage and possibly cost us a couple of 100 tonnes of cane one season.
And what kind of damage do they do?
It would seem that in some varieties they will actually go in and they will chew and flatten half-acre circles. In other varieties I've had them going through and they're just eating a stalk here and there, but they're actually doing quite a bit of damage because there's a dead cane throughout the paddock.
And so what did you do to get rid of those pigs?
We did a baiting program which was quite successful initially, but they're such intelligent animals, we just couldn't get them to continue to take the bait. I tried everything. I was using molasses on top of the poison. I was actually using raw sugar because they've got a very sweet tooth. They would actually take the sugar off the top of the poison and just leave the poison sit there.
The cane farmer says it's just a matter of time before the pigs swim across from the mainland, where they're also an issue.
We had one here 12 months ago. We were harvesting cane and he ran out of the cane in front of the harvester and swam the back channel across to the mainland, and he was over there in a matter of minutes.
And to the southeast, a shortage of food in Urrugi National Park is driving feral pigs out and onto a cane farm near Brooms Head. North Coast Local Land Services Dean Chamberlain says that well over 100 pigs have been culled on that property through trapping and baiting.
National Parks were working with that farmer originally, and we've been working with him now for quite a while to remove the pigs that come onto the cane farm, and they do that quite regularly. Where the pigs are coming from, they probably are coming from the east, from the park area and other potentially freehold land between there and the cane farm. And there's a continual program there that's mainly been involved in trapping. They may be doing some baiting there as well now to just keep that population in check.
National Parks declined to be interviewed, but in a statement said that it does recognise the impact feral pigs have not only on the biodiversity of Urrugi National Park, but also on neighbouring farms. It said an aerial shooting program was conducted in that part of the park last year and a follow-up program is planned for next month. It's also considering baiting. There's also concern about the threat of feral pigs on the coastal emu population in the area after a feral pig was photographed stalking an emu and 2 chicks on a cane farm. Dean Chamberlain.
Yeah, well, pigs are omnivores, so they're quite happy to eat meat, animals as well, and they're well known as a big impact on nesting ground birds and things like that, both on eggs and on actually killing adult animals as well. So they certainly are a major issue on native species that are ground dwellers.
From the Clarence to a feral pig hotspot further north, Bora Ridge in the Richmond Valley, where landholders, including a blueberry farmer, are having success with a new pig bait. Dean Chamberlain says one property collected more than 120 carcasses using hogcorn.
Which is very good because it's very safe as far as non-targets go. It's based on sodium nitrite, which is basically a food preservative that's used human consumption, but pigs are very susceptible to it, so it's a very target-specific toxin.
There's Dean Chamberlain, the team leader of invasive species with North Coast Local Land Services, ending that report by Kim Honan. It's 1:45.
The Country Hour on ABC Radio New South Wales.
Well, Australia's cotton crop sold out quicker than usual this year, with demand so high. Nearly 50% of next season's crop has already been forward sold as well. A big relief for the industry, which 12 months ago had to scramble to find new markets after China put a soft ban on importing Aussie cotton. Cotton Australia CEO Adam Kay says there's global demand for Australian cotton with potential new markets in Turkey and Pakistan.
Well, there seems to be, real demand for cotton globally at the moment. In fact, demand is greater than supply, and we're seeing cotton prices, going through the roof. And Australia sells every bale it produces every year because we're producing such a high quality, contamination-free premium product. But this year it seems to have gone out the door even quicker, and already, I would expect that some, 40, maybe 50% of the crop that we're about to plant has already been sold from the farmer to the various merchants because, prices are so solid.
And that amount of forward selling, is that more than usual?
It's a little bit more than normal because the price is so good. I think people are just, they've done their numbers and said, let's take that price. So, it is up a little bit on normal. And it's also people that have the confidence to sell because in the southern states, Queensland, New South Wales, where the bulk of the cotton industry is, the good rains over the last 2 winters has meant that there's, reasonable amounts of subsoil moisture and moisture in some of the major storage dams, so we know we're going to get a crop. And so when people know they're going to get a crop, they don't hesitate to forward sell.
And just how much quicker did this 2021 cotton crop sell out compared to previous years?
Look, it's a little bit quicker. We sell everything we produce, but it's just sped things up a little bit, just accelerated things and accelerated at a time when China is not in the market. A couple of years ago, China would have taken 70% of the Australian cotton crop, and now they're taking virtually nothing because of their soft ban. And so the Australian cotton shippers, the various merchants that buy the crop off the Australian producer and sell it to the spinning mills of Asia, have done a magnificent job in selling the crop to other markets and some new markets and some developing markets, and so it's a really a great result.
Yeah, we're about 12 months on from that soft ban by China. Was it difficult to find new markets for Australian cotton?
I think everyone was nervous at the start, but with the crop that we've just picked, which was about 2.8 million bales, so a little bit smaller than we'd like, they've been able to find a home. I think the big challenge is the next crop. The one that we're planting now, is anticipated to be 4.5 to up to 5 million bales, and that's going to be a real test. But the industry is up for that. We've been working closely with government on developing new markets as well as expanding existing markets. Some of the countries that are already taking Australian cotton, have been encouraged to take more. So places like Vietnam and Indonesia are taking more Australian cotton than they have in the past, which is great news for us. And then there's other places like Turkey, which has taken little bits in the past, but they've certainly re-entered the market, taking better volumes, and Pakistan is also interested in taking Australian cotton. One of the things that we're working through at the moment is just shipping issues, because world trade has been disrupted by COVID, and there are all sorts of shipping issues and cancellations of vessels, and the cost of containers has gone through the roof. So there's a whole lot of issues there that are making things a little more difficult. But we're confident that we're up to the challenge of making sure the Australian crop in 2022 finds a home.
Adam Kay is the CEO of Cotton Australia. He was speaking there to Dan Fitzgerald. We're talking about container shipping issues, and if freight continues to soar, Australia runs the risk of becoming uncompetitive. That's the fear of the National Farmers Federation. Its chief economist, Ash Saladini, told our reporter, Kath Sullivan, that the price of exporting by sea freight is going through the roof.
It's the actual perfect storm at the moment. So stevedoring costs, shipping costs, and there's port congestion as well. So what that actually means for the average freight user is that costs have gone up by 5 to 6 times in the space of, let's say, 18 months. So that'd be the equivalent of a Big Mac going from $6 or $7 to about $35.
Okay, so what are the implications for exporters, first of all?
So from a farming perspective, we export 75% of our goods. And at the moment, we already pay some of the highest costs for freight. So it costs the same to ship a container of grain from Canada to Indonesia as it does from South Australia, despite it being some 10,000 kilometres shorter. So this spiralling of costs means that we might become less internationally competitive over the short term and potentially the long term as well.
Who's actually paying this extra cost at the moment?
In the end, consumers and growers will have to pay that extra cost, but everyone is paying for it. So freight forwarders are paying for it, consumers are paying for it, and producers are paying for it as well. So in the end, we will all have to pay for it.
When we talk about the container shortage, where are the containers? Surely they haven't just disappeared.
No, so the container shortage is basically a byproduct of, first of all, the COVID lockdowns, particularly in China. So a lot of containers ended up in places where they shouldn't have remained. So they ended up in Europe and in the North America when China closed their factories to get on top of COVID. And ever since, we've been playing catch up. So there are enough containers in the world. It's just they're all in the wrong places at the moment, and it takes 6 to 8 weeks to get a container to where it needs to be. So we've been playing catch up ever since, and the Evergrande calamity as well added to that sort of crisis as well, where shipping was disrupted for 2 to 3 weeks with the Suez Canal being down as well. So there's increasing demand, but some of the issue has been that we've had lockdowns around the world and all the shipping containers are in the wrong places. But the cost blowouts is more than just containers. So international shipping costs have gone up 4 to 5 times. There is extra demand, but also we believe that there's a bit of anti-competitive behaviour by the shippers. The other area is around stevedoring. So at the moment, stevedoring costs are going under the radar, but there are 2 problems with that. One, stevedoring costs have gone up 4 to 5-fold in less than 4 years. The other issue is that all the IR disruptions and other disruptions have actually increased the cost of shipping. So freight users are paying $400 to $500 surcharges for shipping because there's congestion, and that congestion is basically caused by disruptions in the stevedoring supply chain.
That's Ash Saladini from the National Farmers Federation. The ACCC says it has continuing investigation into whether anti-competitive conduct has led to price increases in the container shipping industry. In a statement, Trade Minister said he's asked both DFAT and Austrade to convene a series of roundtables with exporters, peak bodies, port owners and shipping lines to discuss issues relating to cost of shipping and explore what adjustments could be made to policy and regulatory settings as a result. You can read more about that story online at ABC Rural. It's coming up to 6 minutes to 1. Well, we've got time to have a look at some of the issues that have been raised on the text line. Someone says, hope that AWI are listening in regards to wool as to what's happening with cotton and more diversity in the markets, saying that wool can't always keep relying on China. On the labour shortage, someone's texted in saying Kylie Minogue can help out with the cherry harvest or maybe get in a header, do a bit of a driving job that will help with the labour shortage on farm. And a few people texted in about the interview with Paul Toole saying the amalgamation issue, shame on Paul Toole, shame. Amalgamation rode roughshod over the clear will of rural people. Now they have to bear the daily burden of a 50% increase in rate hikes in the Gundagai and Tumbarumba region. They want to be compensated for that. Also, we've got a pensioner who's texted in saying that their rates went up by 62.5%. Because of the merger where they are. And someone else is saying, he mentioned roadworks. Kate says they bring in the contractors. They don't use the locals. They bring in the contractors from out of the area to do the work and send our local teams to far-flung places. They say it's illogical and also a health risk as well. So Kate not happy with the way in which they're doing the roadworks at the moment. It's coming up to 5 minutes to 1. It's time for markets. And Don from Dubbo's texted in saying he'd like to see the new state government not be city-centric like the two previous ones were and the premiers were, and he wants to see a focus on regional development for wealth creation rather than just building entertainment centres in the cities for sporting facilities. Let's go to markets and to Wagga first up, and here's Leanne Dax.
Good afternoon. 34,000 lambs and just over 10,000 sheep sold to a smaller group of buyers, with 5 major processors not attending. Competition remains solid throughout the sale, with another Australian record set for old lambs. Lambs estimated to weigh 42 kilos carcass weight reached the dizzy height of $399.20. New season's quality was mixed, with some lambs showing dryness. Trade lambs for the new seasons were firm to 3 easier, 20 to 24 kilo, 196 to 258, averaging 975 cents a kilogram carcass weight. 24 to 26 kilo, 258 to 281, 26 to 30, 270 to 297, over 30 kilos carcass weight reached 310. Old trade lambs anywhere from 157 to 232. The extra heavy old lambs 266 to $399.20. Merino trades 160 to 220. Heavy merinos 240 to 320. Lambs to restock and feed 166 to 223. With the sheep yet to be sold. Leanne Dax, MLA.
Let's go to Dubbo Cattle now. David Monk.
Numbers are up by 2,300 for a yarding of 4,140. It was a mostly good quality yarding with good numbers of young cattle to suit the feeders and tray buyers, along with some exceptional lines of properly finished ground steers and heifers. There are also some large runs of Boss Indicus cattle, which are mostly presenting in forward to prime condition. Cows were also well supplied. Young cattle of the trade were up to 12 cents cheaper, with prime vealers selling to $5.80. Prime yearlings sold from $4.60 to $5.76. Feeder steers and heifers are up to 12 cents dearer and more in places, with the feeder steers selling from $4.20 to $5.97. Feeder heifers sold from $4.60 to $5.80. Weaner cattle of the restockers remain strong, with the young steers selling to $7.88. Ground steers were up to 35 cents cheaper, losing the previous sales gains, while the ground heifers were 2 to 5 cents cheaper. Prime ground steers sold from $4.20 to $4.90, while the ground heifers sold from $4.15 to $4.70. Secondary cows were a little dearer, while the prime heavyweight cows were 3 cents cheaper. 2 and 3 score cows sold from $3.10 to $3.94, while the prime heavyweight cows sold from $3.70 to $4.12 to average $3.99. Heavy bull sold to $3.47. This is David Monk reporting from Dubbo.
Staying with the cattle, let's go to Yass Cattle now and Graham Richard.
Good afternoon. Numbers lifted to 671, but the quality and condition of the cattle fell. There were some very good cattle which suited both feeders and the trade, but there was an influx of plainer and lighter cattle which sold mainly to feeders and restockers. Around 80 cows were penned. The restocking weaners were dearer, with steers mainly $6.16 to $7.63 and heifers $5.50 to $6.30. The feeder steers were firm to 5 cents dearer on the heavyweights, $5.28 to $6.40. Heifers sold between $4.80 and $5.40. Trade cattle lifted 20 cents, quality related. The steers $4.45 to $5.50, heifers $4.80 to $5.35. Growing steers and bullocks were cheaper, $4.30 to $4.66. Heavy heifers dropped 20 cents, 3.80 to 4.60. The cows were back 2 to 6 cents, with the 2-score cows 3.10 to 3.30. Heavy 3 and 4 scores 3.70 to 4.20. And this has been Graham Richard at Yass.
Thanks, Graham. You're listening to the Country Hour. I'm off tomorrow, so I'll be back with you on Monday. Have a great weekend. And I'll also remind you about our Facebook page. You can there's quite a few stories that are worth reading on the Facebook page, particularly with regards to the politics that we've seen changing over the last week or so. So head to Facebook and search for ABC Rural. I'll talk to you on Monday. It's coming up to 1 o'clock.